Cool. I have 12 noon. I think we can get started. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today for session 5 of the Refocus and Rebuild webinar series focused on helping Virginia businesses reopen in a COVID-19 world. My name is Sandy Ratliff. I'm with Virginia Community Capital, and we are happy to be a partner in this webinar series with Virginia Small Business Development Center Network, GenEdge, University of Virginia's College at Wise Office of Economic Development, and the Southwest Virginia Alliance for Manufacturing. This is a weekly series that we're holding over a 13-week period. And again, it's to help business owners and leaders build skills and knowledge to manage as they grow, as well as share resources to help them during this pandemic. If you noticed in the reminder that you received regarding the workshop, we provided a link to a variety of templates and a guidebook that can help you. The whole objective of this series is to help you develop a resiliency plan should you ever face another pandemic or crisis. But we'll talk more about that as we get into the program. But before we get started and I introduce my co-host, I wanted to let everyone know that our objective is to stay within a 1-hour goal. So to do that, we've muted everyone. However, we want to hear from you. And if you have a question for our presenter today, if you will post those in the Q&A section or in the chat, we will address those at the end of the presentation. I'm happy to be joined today by my co-host, Lenny Gale Mitchum, who is the Executive Director of the Southwest Virginia Alliance of Manufacturing, who will introduce our guest and lead the session. Lenny Gale, it's all yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. When we were brainstorming these topics and trying to choose speakers and trainers for these different things, Matt Davison with Baker Donaldson definitely came to mind. He has done some great trainings for us in the past for various different topics related to employment. He's a great speaker and trainer, so we are so excited to have him join us today. I'll do a quick introduction and then turn it over to him. So Matt Davison has been partnering with businesses for more than 20 years to provide discerning yet practical advice and representation related to all aspects of the employer-employee relationship. Having served as in-house counsel for human resources as an NYSE traded company, his experience specifically includes, but is not limited to, issues involving employee hiring, employment agreements, restrictive covenants such as non-compete and non-solicit agreements, employee handbook and policy development, wage and hour issues under the FLSA and or state law, employee training, employee leave issues under the ADA, FMLA, and or state law, harassment and other discrimination under Title VII, the ADA, ADEA, and other federal and state laws, whistleblower issues, employee discipline terminations, reductions in force, and mergers and acquisitions. Wow, Matt, you do a lot of things. He's also licensed to practice in Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Lenny Gale. I am going to now attempt to share my screen. And you can tell me if this works, Lenny Gale.
Looks great.
All right. Mission 1 accomplished.
All right.
For the session. Yeah, we've had a couple of technical challenges this morning, of course. I'm sure that's not happened to anyone else on this call. And just with, you'll notice I don't have a picture. That's part of the challenges that we've had. But I do appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with each of you virtually today, and I appreciate that introduction, Lenny Gale. We're going to talk about what I believe to be a very important topic, particularly now as we find ourselves really enthralled in so many really heavy issues as a nation and as a region, and all of these things that necessarily flow over into our workplaces. I know that you all could be spending your time this afternoon on a number of different things. So I just want to commend you, first of all, for taking the time to consider these issues and how your workplace can become stronger through diversity and inclusion during this time. So we'll start here with a statistic. I'm big on statistics. I think they're interesting. We all know that diversity and inclusion is not a new topic in the business world. We know that many businesses, maybe many of you, hopefully many of you, have been very busy and active in promoting diversity in the workplace for years. But with that said, it seems that a lot of those companies, the same companies, and many of those who haven't dealt with these issues as robustly before, now find themselves rethinking their approach given the current scenario. So on the slide here, you see a reference this recent SHRM statistic that 43% of small businesses now say that they've started rethinking the very way that they do business as a result of the pandemic. That's, actually I would think it to be higher, but at least half of those who responded admitted to that. And why is that the case? Well, I think it's simple in large part because, companies are being forced to be creative to survive. Flexibility is definitely the name of the game, and that's true when it comes to workers as they've gone remote in many cases, and those that remain are on the ground or working together in new ways, and all of that as a result of the pandemic. So then why diversity and inclusion now? Where does that fit into the mix? How does it fit into the mix? In my mind, it fits very well because really, with all that being said, there's never really been a better time to really step back and consider, your workforce, your workplaces to find better new ways to solve problems. And this is one of those areas that deserves that kind of look back. Really at the heart of what diversity and inclusion is all about is, new ways to solve problems. So today with that backdrop, we're going to consider really the what, the why, and the how of diversity and inclusion in the current world that we find ourselves in, and see if we can come to some common and hopefully practical suggestions how you can reinforce these notions in your own workplaces. So the what, let me back up. Yeah. The what, first of all, the word diversity, we're familiar with that term. It's a common term, but what does it mean? We're talking about differences. That's the easiest way to define what diversity is and what workplace diversity is all about. I like the second definition of variety. Now we note that the definition includes all differences. And we'll talk more about that in a minute as we go along, but the key again is simple. We're talking about finding value in variety. And we're talking about variety in all sorts of ways, through culture, background, variety of thought, all of the differences that make us unique as individuals all have value and can be leveraged. Diversity, of course, encompasses all the ways that we're similar and different. It involves variations and factors that we control, as well as those that we have no control of. Diversity has been defined as a point of respect in which things differ. So we are different from one another individually and as in the groups we choose to join, and those that we're born to. That those differences, of course, again, all have value. Diversity is ultimately a people issue. You can start there. We're focused on differences and similarities that people bring to an organization. And usually the dimensions go beyond what we're legally obligated to consider, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. But really, that's just a starting place, right? In what we're legally obligated in terms of non-discrimination and equal opportunity, affirmative action, etc. But we go beyond that, of course, and deal with dimensions that influence the identities and perspectives that people bring, such as profession, education, parental status, geographic location, and those are just a few of the various factors that we have to consider, or we should consider. So back to the legal prohibitions, since this is kind of my bailiwick, I thought I'd need to stick a slide in here about what we're legally obligated to prohibit. Discrimination and harassment, generally speaking, based on any legally protected class or category under federal or state law. So we're talking about race, color, gender. Now, sexual preference and gender identification are very clearly included in what gender discrimination is after recent Supreme Court cases. Age, religion, national origin, disability, even genetic information, and that list can go on depending on where you are, as states and locales have different and individualized protections. So no discrimination, no harassment based on any of those differences, right? We also know that it's illegal to retaliate against an individual for bringing a claim of discrimination or for participating in an investigation or opposing discriminatory practices. It's also illegal to make decisions based on stereotypes or assumptions. It can easily be turned into a case of discrimination based on those protected characteristics. So obviously staying away from that's important. We're denying, this is something we seem to overlook sometimes, but opportunities to a person because of their association with a protected individual. Association claims under various statutes have become more and more prevalent. And again, just another legal prohibition when it comes to considering differences and not discriminating. But your values, these are just think of as the starting place, okay, when it comes to what you want to do in promoting diversity and inclusion. Your values and your policies hopefully require more. And that is, they hopefully require that you treat all people the same, regardless of what their differences are. Not just those legally protected characteristics, but you're just fair, okay, with regard to people, regardless of their distinguishing factors. So the layers of diversity, this is an interesting slide. We use this a lot in training supervisors and managers, but it really, I think, does a good job of showing us, instead of kind of laying out the 4 layers of the factors that are involved. How do we categorize all these and understand the differences? The different nuances here are demonstrated. There are internal dimensions and external dimensions. Differences being internal dimensions are those that you have no control over, okay, the differences that you're born with, so to speak. And then external dimensions, as you work your way outside the wheel, are those that individuals do have some influence over. And even getting to the outside, when we deal with kind of cultural workforce diversity. But all of these differences are important, some controllable, some not, but all very important to consider. Of course, as a concept, diversity is considered to be inclusive of everyone. We talked about that a little bit. And the initiatives must then complement non-discrimination compliance programs by creating the workplace environment, organizational culture for making differences work. It's about learning from others who are not the same, about dignity and respect for all, and about creating working environments and practices that encourage learning from others and capture the advantage of diverse perspectives. And diversity means that, we're ensuring individuals from different backgrounds are not only represented in the company, but across all the different levels within the company, management, lower level positions, and everything in between. And that the company fosters and encourages the diversity of input and viewpoints in the businesses that will necessarily result from all of these distinguishing factors. So that's a lot. So, if we could boil things down to kind of what diversity is not and what diversity is, I'll start with the not. Diversity is not becoming like one another. Okay, it's not promoting differences to the extent that everyone becomes the same. It's not even requiring people to like one another. What diversity is about is allowing and respecting differences until they really don't make a difference at all. When we value diversity, of course, we seek to integrate and include, not alienate. Remember, America is a melting pot, so we don't want everything to become exactly the same. We want everything to go well together in the melting pot, and that's, I think, true of what we want in our workforces. What about inclusion? This is another term that's goes hand in hand with diversity. But what do we mean by inclusion? SHRM has defined inclusion to mean the achievement of a work environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, have equal access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute fully to the organization's success. So in many ways, it's just the outflow of a focus on diversity that we've talked about up to this point, and knowing that it's not only promoting those differences internally, but allowing for them and the differences in thought, and actually seeing those things manifest in practical ways throughout the organization. So that's the what of diversity and inclusion. I said we do the what, the why, and the how. Well, here's the why. Why do we care? Why are we talking about this today? Why should we be striving for diversity and inclusion in our workforce? Why does it matter? But easily the most important thing, the most important answer is it's the right thing to do. I think hopefully everyone on the call would agree that it's right to treat people fairly. So beyond that, you look for other reasons, and one becomes the business case. Diversity and differences in thought, being fair, helps the organization internally and externally as well. Changing demographics in our populations ultimately will affect who you're selling to, your products, your services. It will also affect who's building your products, working for you, provide services. So without a workforce that's reflective of a diverse consumer and labor pool, businesses will have a real major problem of relatability. And it could be difficult to succeed with that kind of a problem. The economic reality is that we deal with fierce competition every day in business. Competition for revenue, competition for employees. So companies are looking for an edge in understanding the shifting consumer base in this global marketplace. Drawing talent from that base offers the best entry into those multifaceted markets. Here's an interesting statistic again from a BCG Diversity and Innovation Survey in 2017. Shows that companies with more diverse leadership teams have a huge advantage when it comes to innovation revenue. Those with a below average scorecard had 20% 26% average innovation revenue, and those with an above average diversity scorecard had 45% average innovation revenue. So, almost twice as much. And that's not really surprising when you think about what diversity and inclusion are all about. So then to sum up so far, the real goal here in many ways is simply to increase the awareness of the values of differences in the workplace and the importance of utilizing these differences on a day-to-day basis. And then switching gears just a little bit, now that we've talked about the what and the why, I want to focus the rest of our discussion time on the practical notions and the how we can move the ball forward when it comes to these issues and having a robust diversity and inclusion initiative in our workplaces. How can we achieve the goal that I just mentioned? The big picture is fostering a workplace of respect. Respect for people of different races, genders, nationalities, and any other differentiator, but respect, okay, being the common denominator. And part of that, would be considering diversity and inclusion training. I think it's very important for at least for your supervisors and managers, and perhaps for all of your employees, depending on your business. And perhaps in that training, going over a lot of the things that we'll discuss from this point forward, but having that be an essential part of your business equation. We want to, again, increase awareness and inclusion of the values that diverse employees bring to the table. And that'll help us in everything that we do. So let's talk about culture for a minute then. How are you going to build a culture of respect when we don't really know what we're talking about when it comes to culture? Culture is more than manners. Culture is something that's very prevalent among our thoughts. And in today's global economy, it's probably the single biggest impact on relationship buildings in a diverse workplace. Really, the term culture denotes the whole product of an individual, group, or society of intelligent beings. It's comprised of values, norms, institutions, and artifacts. Values dictate ideas about what in life seems important and the expectations of how people will behave. So really, culture is, you can think of it as essentially our software. And when I say on the slide there that we're captives of our culture, what that really means is that almost all of our reactions are culture driven and sometimes even subconscious. You don't sit down necessarily and think about how to feel or respond to most actions and communications throughout your day. You just react or respond. And some of how that occurs is built up in your culture, of course. All that really gets back to the Myers-Briggs theory that essentially even most seemingly random actions and reactions people have are rooted, at least in part, in their complex personalities and sometimes in their subconscious. So what shapes our cultural identity? Some of these are obvious. Our ethnicity, our race, religion, education, but our profession, our field of work, what we do, the organizations we associate with, and even our upbringing. Where you grow up has a tremendous impact and inevitably affects your worldview and how you view things. I'd say that every one of your employees is going to have somewhat different views and reactions because they all have some variation in cultural identity. And even if there are common denominators when it comes to even say race and ethnicity and religion, there are going to be the other differences that come to bear as well. Aspects of culture. Really, there are 10 aspects you can think of of culture that have a significant impact on communications among people. Okay, understanding how people from different cultures wish to conduct themselves and understanding how people wish to be treated are probably the most difficult to perceive. So you have sense of self and space, you have communication style and language, dress and appearance, food and eating habits, time and time consciousness. If you just think about these things and how they manifest differences, relationships, values and norms, beliefs and attitudes, mental process and learning, and then number 10, work habits and practices. So out of that group, if you think about it, maybe food may be one of those that's probably, the most notable cultural aspect that we see day to day. We have what we refer to sometimes as Asian food, or different things that are obvious in that regard. But some of them are not as obvious. We see clothing as one of the most visible that demonstrates some of our culture. We just need to be mindful of those aspects in our daily conversations and our behavior, and know that those are different. Culture is rooted in core values, which some say are formed even by the time you reach 10 years old, and typically don't change outside of some major event. So your cultural lens or filter would include values, beliefs, attitudes, language, background. Also includes your shoulds, your oughts, and your musts. In short, it's where you hold your worldview and context through which you interpret others' behavior as well as your own experiences. The messages you receive from your parents, peers, television, everything, all reside within your cultural lens and filter and are reflected, manifested in the 10 aspects of culture that you see on your screen. What about cultural sources of misunderstanding? I think this is interesting. There are many differences in how cultures interpret gestures and basic actions. Just a few examples: sitting with your foot resting on the opposite side of your knee with your legs crossed, so to speak, that's considered very rude in the Middle East, as it is to show your foot without your shoe. Very offensive. In Italy and in some South American countries, it's very common to arrive a few minutes late to a meeting, but Americans and other nationalities may find that to be rude. In some Asian cultures, it can get to even things as simple as presenting a business card. In some of those cultures, it's important to stand and to present those kinds of credentials with two hands in respectful fashion. In America, not so much. So those are just all, not examples that you may see every day in your businesses, but just help to show us how different cultures can be on even everyday things. So here's some quick pointers to avoid in helping to avoid cultural misunderstandings. Keep to appropriate subjects in conversation. Be mindful of your facial expressions, and of course touch, the sound of your voice, your loudness, your pitch, your silence. It's important to first actively listen. You can repeat others' individual case in a fashion that demonstrates that you've understood the speaker, and be mindful of their personal space and tone of voice. Second, you can focus on what you have to say so that the individual will understand your position, paying attention to your own nonverbal cues. And then speak with a purpose. So too much conversation can be counterproductive, and the way you say something can be more important than what is being said. So sticking to appropriate conversation can be very, very important. And these are important things, again, to make sure that your team understands to foster appropriate diversity and inclusion. So in your training as well, you make sure your team, to help facilitate communication across cultural boundaries, You want to recognize differences, build self-awareness, all these things, describe and identify, then interpret. Not assume your interpretation is correct, of course. I mentioned verbalizing your own nonverbal signs and acknowledging hesitation or discomfort, giving time and attention when it comes to communicating, and not judging. Very important there. Most important, though, probably when it comes to fostering diversity and inclusion in the workplace, is to train your team to find common ground. Learn to appreciate the similarities as well as the differences. There is a need for esteem and belonging that we all have. If you focus on the common instead of the different, all employees want to feel like they belong, regardless of where they come from or who they are. All employees want to be appreciated. So it's helpful to foster camaraderie among coworkers, of course, and allow them to build on their own shared values in that regard. There's some ideas about the need for esteem and belonging as well on the screen. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit now and then talk about, as part of the how to diversity and inclusion, organizational culture. Organizational culture consists of shared beliefs and values established by company leaders that ultimately shape employee perceptions, behaviors, and understanding. Sets the tone for everything an enterprise does, and will continue to play a large role in how we respond in this current environment with the pandemic. The way we work has drastically changed. The way our people interface with one another has drastically changed. And the new normal may or may not align with the company's established culture to this point. So the impact of the pandemic has forced us in many cases to reveal how our culture, the company's culture, values empathy, collaboration, and innovation. And interestingly, there's 67% of organizations in one study I found had stated that they were currently undergoing cultural change initiatives. And why? Well, because many companies are finding that their culture is a barrier to change. And in this environment, again, change is the name of the game. Flexibility is the name of the game. Now, interestingly, it's often employees on the ground who find the cross-team collaboration difficult, even when executives have agreed to work together across organizational lines, departments, etc. Lower-level employees sometimes are less likely to follow suit. Although it can be tempting to blame that disconnect on a lack of tools or technology, some research could suggest that it's actually a cultural divide and not necessarily even a technological one that keeps teams from working together at their best. One of the biggest barriers to establishing culture of collaboration is simply the natural human inclination to resist change, whether it's a reluctance to share information with another team or a team member even, or reluctant attitude toward new processes or technologies. That kind of resistance can sabotage our ability to cultivate a collaborative culture. In fact, so a lack of true partnership is a prime cultural barrier to transformation and change. Fragmented cultures can often breed misaligned goals, and that can cause further dysfunction. So many of the behavioral change initiatives that we heard that employees are undertaking now do fail because employees, well, lots of different reasons, but sometimes because employees are not empowered to adapt or because they fear that change could actually hurt them. Most behavioral change initiatives fail when employees aren't empowered to adapt. What if the new ways of working don't produce results? Maybe a thought by the employee. What if they take longer? What if they cause confusion? What if they don't work with the current processes or technologies that are in place? Those are all fair questions, and some employees will resist because they feel failure. But to combat this, we can create an environment where failures are accepted, even celebrated in some cases as a natural part of innovation. The notion of celebrating failure might seem strange, but the purpose is to encourage curiosity and find opportunity. When executives and managers share their failures with their teams and probe these tales for lessons learned, it changes the cultural mindset. It reveals failures not as a career-ending mistake, but as a learning opportunity. It can demonstrate the need for resiliency as a core competency, and then encourages employees to take their own risks, even if it means striking out. So this willingness to stumble then and bounce back is necessary in any thriving organization. We know that change is messy and nonlinear, and that mistakes will be made along the way, yet change is the only way forward, particularly in these times. So here's an interesting quote I found. It said that from Francis Hasselbein, that culture does not change because we desire to change it. Culture changes when the organization is transformed. The culture reflects the realities of people working together every day. And I just think that's a great quote because, changing culture then requires two components. There's organizational transformation, and then secondly, a shift in the day-to-day experiences of people. Ultimately, culture is not dictated. It's created in every interaction between and among the members of our organizations. So, more about our organizational culture. To create a culture where collaborative, integrative decision-making can thrive, leaders need to focus on what I believe are three main areas. They need to empower employees to collaborate, measure collaborative behavior, and then model and support collaborative behavior from the top. While culture changes need to be realized on the ground, they must be supported from the top. Executives cannot be immune from the changes the organization wishes to see. In fact, they need to be the primary champions. That's why performance with integrity is key. Business leaders can't just talk the talk, but they need to walk the walk. To succeed, the cultural values we wish to promote need to be embedded in our processes. They must be evident in how we structure our teams. They must be borne out in our budgets, our priorities, and our policies. And if not, then our attempts to change may just prove to be cosmetic only. So according then to one report, senior leaders at many organizations, 83% in the sample, consistently say they communicate the importance of culture. Okay. But in a drastically fewer number of those companies, the leaders consistently behave in a way that's aligned with that culture. And even in few organizations, the leaders consistently manage business processes based on the desired culture that they want. They may talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk. And that approach may help explain why only 32% of HR leaders agree that their organization is effective at embedding culture into their employees' day-to-day work. And who would know better than the HR folks, right? So here's a couple of slides that I'll share with you as we're kind of wrapping up. But the overall strategies for change, things to look at, awareness, exposure, and accountability. Very important. Making change visible, conscious, having positive examples in an environment, and then, of course, again, walking the walk and not just talking the talk by having practices and policies. Slower decision making, quite frankly, is big. Checklists and other procedural kinds of changes are important as part of the accountability measure. So motivation, to be fair, matters for sure. Again, the right thing to do is to be fair, but identifying these other things are important as well, and identifying discrepancy between conscious ideals and non-conscious atomic biases or automatic biases, deliberative decision making, slowing down. Of course, the more rushed you are, the more likely your decision making will fall back on unconscious schemas. Objective criteria is important. Fighting instinct to favor who fits in. It's not always someone, like you. Recognizing the illusion of objectivity sometimes, and knowing that a climate of fairness makes the difference, avoiding the first impression and gut response of decision making, all important things that your team should know when it comes to these initiatives. So ultimately, our objectives for management initiatives, diversity initiatives, the purpose of the training, purpose of inclusion training would be to help individuals examine their assumptions about diversity and to assist them in becoming more culturally competent. The statistics demonstrate that utilizing people's uniqueness enhances communication, problem solving, and decision-making skills, thereby improving organizational productivity and performance. So the objectives here: individualize personal qualities such as knowledge, skill, and ability, cultivate awareness of potential bias, encourage co-employees to learn more about one another, emphasize teamwork and shared goals. All of these things being very important goals of the initiatives, and to eliminate, minimize biases through awareness. So maintaining a diverse population at any company is extremely important. Building an organizational culture that incorporates differences, utilizes multicultural teams, recruits and retains a diverse workforce, and reduces employee turnover, all an important part of encouraging and fostering proper diversity and inclusion. So at the end of the day, that's what we're after, right? Robust efforts to foster a culture of diversity and inclusion. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, and because it's the right thing for our businesses in the end. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I see that I'm ahead of schedule, so we may have some time to give back to our attendees, but I think we've got time to take some questions as well. Want to give?
All right. I'm not seeing any questions in our chat or Q&A. So
I have one.
Okay.
This is Mandy. I was actually wondering if you have some, tips or suggestions for maybe icebreakers that would help be diversity inclusive, especially over internet and lots of Zoom type of meetings, to continue to engage with your employees.
Right. That's a great question, and there are tons of them out there. One that I saw lately was just to engage with, if you can, it's a little more difficult with groups, but to have employees interview each other about their likes and dislikes, and then have the opposite employee share the response of the interviewee. So that, they learn about each other, you get out lots of interesting information in that way, and can focus on the similarities and the differences.
Thank you.
That's just one idea. I know there are tons of others as well.
very good. Okay, the next question we do have here is, do you have a suggestion where we might learn more about cultural differences? Your examples were very eye-opening.
There's tons of reading out there. I can send some links to some of the, if I can get hooked up with that person, some of the research that I found and can send that. But, you know, a lot of it's just from experience and that kind of thing as well. So, but I'm happy to share some of my research as well.
Okay, thank you.
Matthew, I've got a question.
Okay.
This is Sandy. What challenges can you share that employers have found during the COVID-19? And if they have had some challenges during the last 6 months, how did they address those?
Oh gosh, lots of challenges. Some somewhat related to our topics today, and many that aren't. The leave issues have been probably the most prevalent. You know, with the FFCRA and how much leave employees can take for what reasons. Of course, the interpretation, the regs and guidance on those issues have been less than perfectly clear in many cases. So, you know, most of the employers that I work with, my clients are, you know, they want to be flexible with their employees, and in many cases they can be. They have workforces that can work remotely, that can multitask and do those kinds of things. But, you know, sometimes that creates a big problem, and we've had that come up. Also, just communication, you know, among employees. It seems like, you know, I've had to deal with several situations where it seems like the employees have forgotten about the handbook or have forgotten about the rules of engagement because they're sitting behind a computer screen and not in person. And sometimes you have to kind of refocus them on those things.
Oh.
Hope that answers your question.
It does, and I suspect many employers have used, I hope they have used this time to update their employee handbooks and to make them
That's
more, include some of the lessons they learned through COVID-19.
That would definitely be a smart thing to do. And I have helped many clients in that regard, just with, you know, things that they haven't thought about before, but have presented, you know, during primarily having so many people working from home, you know, working remotely.
Okay, we have another question.
To have
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say it's important to always have those policies reviewed. I think at least annually, and you know, not that you have to replace your handbook or revise your handbook annually, but to at least look at things, and then if there's supplements that need to be made or what have you, you're at least kind of constantly looking at your policies to make sure that they're up to date.
Very good. So the next question that came in is, do you think organizational leaders buy into how diversity helps the bottom line? My limited view is there's not the talk and walk thing. How do you break through managerial thinking, maybe in a creative way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some companies are really good about it, and some just aren't. Small businesses, quite frankly, I think struggle more. I know that many times large companies really don't have a choice, even to continue to do businesses, to do business with some particular customers or suppliers or what have you. Then they, you know, have to get engaged and incorporate some of the initiatives that you would think of. You know, I think just providing, you know, the best real life examples that you can to where, for instance, diversity of thought helped solve a problem. I think that's really what may be the best at practically kind of convincing someone that it's worth the effort.
Very good. Interesting.
Okay.
All right. Those are all the questions I'm seeing. Sandy, anything else from you?
Well, he's tired of hearing from me. I would just ask any of my other colleagues that's part of the team if you have any questions for Matthew. Well, I see that the cat's got their tongue today. Wait, I think you've got one just came up.
It was more of a comment than a question, just saying this has been really good, very helpful to guide my business. Thank you for that comment.
Appreciate that.
And ladies, I'm more than glad to address questions after this session. If you get additional questions, just email them to me or give me a call, and I'm happy to follow up with attendees or through you all, whatever makes the most sense. I know it's a lot of information at once, kind of drinking from a fire hose. So there may be questions that come after folks have a chance to kind of digest some of what they heard.
Very good. I think we have all become a little bit more accustomed to drinking from a fire hose as of late. So one more thing popped up. How can I find info on creating an employee handbook?
We've got tons of resources on that. We put out a lot of primers, and we've done lots of different presentations. You may want to just start on our website, or if I can get a contact for that person, I can send them direct link to information that could be helpful.
Okay.
Matthew, if you would like to send me the link, and I can include that when we send a follow-up email to all the participants with a copy of the slides. And of course, this is being recorded, and we can share the link to where they might want to view it again and use it as a resource, but also they may have a colleague or someone that could have value in the content from today.
Sounds good. Be happy to do so.
All right. Well, we thank you so much for doing this for us and providing this great information.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope everyone has a great day.
You too, Matt. Thank you. Thank you all.
And I just want to say thanks to Matthew again. I know that you don't put a presentation together in just a few minutes. It takes time, and I appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to present for us today. And Lenny Gale, thanks for your help. And again, we will be sending out an email with all the content. Just want to do a plug for next Thursday's session. That will be focused on preparing for your next crisis. That does happen. So hopefully we'll help you in getting prepared for that. And that will be presented by Gen Edge. And this is all, again, everything that we're doing over the next 13 weeks is things that need to go into your resiliency plan. And again, that template to help you develop that is on the link for the webinar. And again, as you develop these things and grow, don't forget you've got great help with your small business development centers in your area, not just in Southwest Virginia, but there's a great network throughout the Commonwealth. And any of the team here that's putting this program together is there to help you. So again, I thank you. I thank everyone for participating, and also for our attendees. I know you're taking time out of your busy schedule, but I also give you a hats off because you are trying to grow professionally and to help your companies going forward. So thank you. Hope everybody has a great day, and we'll hopefully see you next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.